1977, Sandra Monsey snapped a photo of what might be Champ, the so-called Lake Champlain monster. In 1979, when she released it to the press, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Today Show, and hundreds of other media, the whole world quickly learned about Vermont's underwater wonder. Miss Monsey's odyssey was dramatized on NBC TV's Unsolved Mysteries and Fox's Sightings. A 90-minute documentary was produced in Japan. Hundreds of books, magazines, and newspapers flaunted the story. Over the years, Lake Champlain's elusive critter became a cryptozoological superstar. But what we didn't know is that an equally mysterious photograph was snapped that same year, though oddly it was never exploited by the press. Instead, it was quickly filed away, kept a secret, and mostly forgotten by all but a few believers and skeptics. This remarkable what's-it was photographed on land, in the depths of the forest, once again raising the question, are there really monsters in our midst? This is not, of course, a new question. For hundreds of years, Vermonters have been seeing strange things in the woods. Some of these encounters have been documented. Enough sightings are on record to provide a continuing ribbon of weirdness, starting perhaps in 1609, with Samuel de Champlain himself. He heard Native American stories of oversized, hairy men who hid in the dense woods. Monsieur Champlain disregarded the stories as fantasies. Perhaps he was too hasty. Historically, the first recorded encounter came in 1759 with a man named Duluth, a scout with Rogers Rangers. While they were retreating after the raid on the Abenaki settlement of Odenak, near Memphremagog Bay, the men were ever being annoyed, for not reason, by a large black bear, who would throw large pine cones and nuts down upon us from trees and ledges. The Indians being also disgusted, and knew him and call him Wejuk, or Wet Skin. Wet Skin, renamed Slippery Skin by the European settlers, was still around as Vermont's northeast kingdom began to grow. There, during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the towns of Leamington, Maidstone, Morgan, Victory, and Westmore were routinely harassed by this fearsome oddity. Those who confronted the thing identified it as a bear of tremendous proportions. It terrorized the inhabitants with a series of hostile pranks, including tearing up their gardens, frightening their livestock, stealing food, destroying machinery, and attacking their children with stones. All attempts to trap it or kill it were predictably unsuccessful. But here's the thing. Old Slippery Skin was like no bear that anyone had ever seen. Not only was it extraordinarily intelligent, but it always walked on its hind legs, never on all fours. Recently, researchers have taken a new look at this old tale. Could Slippery Skin have been something other than an uber bear? Most likely. Whatever it may have been, it seemed to be trying to discourage the encroachment of human settlement into an area that had long been its own domain. Suspects more tangible than myth include a disgruntled Indian, a hermitical eccentric, or quite possibly what we know today as Bigfoot. This oversized hirsute hominid has never gone away, suggesting that if it exists outside the realm of conventional zoology, there must be a breeding pool large enough to sustain a population. He, she, or it is still sighted with alarming regularity. even in populated parts of the state. Certainly, there have been as many Bigfoot sightings as Champ sightings. It's just that Champ gets all the publicity. And the existing photograph, seemingly of Bigfoot, though never widely publicized, suggests that he, like Champ, is not a hallucination. The photo itself is almost as mysterious as the image it contains. Its primary investigator, Dr. Warren Cook of Castleton State College, is dead. He was part of the conspiracy that hushed up the picture's existence. During my research, I was given a letter from Dr. Cook to Don Cochran, who in 1987 was working at what today is known as the Mountaintop Inn and Resort in Chittenden. I phoned Mr. Cochran on July 21st, 2006, hoping for clarification. It was a very brief, non-conversation. When I told him what I was calling about, he said, "I don't want to talk about it," and hung up the phone. Because of this gothic reception, the mystery deepened. My most direct links to the photo were either deceased or not talking. Nonetheless, I was determined to sort things out for a magazine article, but my deadline was becoming near lethal. I began placing a series of panicky phone calls. A lot of people in the Chittenden area recalled something about the incident, but no one could give me specifics. Who took the photo? Where exactly was it taken? Why was there an apparent cloak of silence over its existence? When I connected with Roger Hill, Activities and Facilities Director at the Mountaintop Inn and Resort, he recalled a few telling details. What I remember about the picture, he said, was that it was taken on Forest Service property near here, which we have to have a permit to use for skiing and horseback riding. In the foreground, the picture shows a couple of stringers running across a stream. That's the beginning of a bridge that was being built for cross-country skiing. I'm not sure if the photo was taken by Don Cochran, but he was involved in one way or another. After it was developed, it came back, and somebody started looking rather oddly at that figure in the background. Some of us wonder what the heck it is. There in the trees, as if it had been watching them all along, was what appeared to be the stocky torso and head of a gorilla. Its featureless face seemed surrounded with silvery hair. Through another series of phone conversations, including chats with former inn owners, I was able to piece together a more complete version of the story. The photo was apparently taken by Don Cochran in October of 1977, 2.9 miles into the Chittenden woods. He was accompanied by 2 other men. No one noticed anything unusual until they examined the developed prints. Not knowing what to make of the puzzle in his picture, Mr. Cochran brought it to the attention of Dr. Cook. For many years, Dr. Cook had actively investigated the possibility that Vermont might be home to a hidden Bigfoot tribe. This photograph seemed to back that up. Dr. Cook submitted it in the negative to a prestigious photographic lab in Los Angeles, who assured him the negative had not been tampered with. In a letter to Mr. Cochran, Dr. Cook wrote, "I think I can assert without doubt that whatever caused the image on your negative, it was transitory." Dr. Cook and his team had visited the spot to try to identify anything that could have been mistaken for a giant ape. After taking more pictures, they cleared away the bushes within 60 feet of where the image had appeared. We found no upturned stump or hole of any size to account for the big black image in your photo. In July of 2006, I asked photographer and photo analyst Sarah Vogelsang, who occasionally works with paranormal investigators of New England, to take a new look at the mystery photo. Because we did not possess the negative, Ms. Vogelsang was at a disadvantage. With some frustration, she told me,
"I can't seem to figure it out."
Her cautious conclusion was as follows.
My analysis of the photo, given that this is the only evidence presented at this time, it's not enough to convince me that the dark object in the image is a living ape-like creature, assuming that that is what we're looking for due to the lack of highlights. But it is also convincing enough to believe otherwise.
To me, Ms. Vogelsang's analysis of the photo is an apt metaphor for the whole Vermont Bigfoot enigma. People repeatedly see something, but they don't know what it is. The point seems to be that it, whatever it is, has been surfacing for centuries. While the skeptics, along with most local media, dismiss Bigfoot sightings as nothing but a pile of ape droppings, the persistence of evidence suggests something mysterious is out there. Do families of Bigfoots live in little enclaves in the most inaccessible regions of our state? Or are they migratory, passing through Vermont according to some as yet undiscovered timetable, in the manner of catamounts and salmon? This is all part of the mystery. What we have as of this writing is dots of evidence, and it's time for investigators with uninhibited curiosity to connect those dots. One such dot is an early encounter reported October 18th, 1879, on the front page of the New York Times. Pownal, Vermont, October 17th. Much excitement prevailed among the sportsmen of this vicinity over the story that a wild man was seen on Friday, last by two young men while hunting in the mountains south of Williamstown. The young men described the creature as being about 5 feet high, resembling a man in form and movement, but covered all over with bright red hair, and having a long straggling beard, and with very wild eyes. When first seen, the creature sprang from behind a rocky cliff and started for the woods nearby, when mistaking it for a bear or other wild animal. One of the men fired, and it is thought wounded it, for the fierce cries of pain and rage. It turned on its assailants, driving them before it at high speed. They lost their guns and ammunition in their flight, and dared not return for fear of encountering the strange being. Even in those days, stories of Vermont's hidden hairy hominids were well known. The article goes on. There is an old story, told many years ago, of a strange animal frequently seen along the range of the Green Mountains, resembling a man in its appearance, but so wild that no one could approach it near enough to tell what it was or where it dwells. From time to time, hunting parties in the early days of the town used to go out in pursuit of it, but of late years, no trace of it has been seen. And the story, told by young men who claim to have seen it, revives again the old story of the wild man of the mountains. There is talk of making up a party to go in search of the creature. Note how myth and fact collide in this 19th century accounting. But it's facts we're interested in, and the evidence continues to pile up. Hundreds of examples, sometimes solitary sightings, sometimes clusters, right up until the present day. In February 1951, lumberman John Rowell and a Mr. Kennedy returned to their logging operation in Sudbury Swamp. they discovered a canvas-covered oil drum had vanished overnight. Somehow the 450-pound barrel had traveled from a tractor to a spot several hundred feet into the woods. Examining the ground revealed dozens of huge human-like footprints. Mr. Rowell photographed the tracks with his Polaroid. They measured 20 inches long and 8 inches wide. In the early 1960s, William Lyford, a Plainfield farmer, heard his cows making a ruckus. Heading out to check, he saw a tall, hairy creature standing upright. When Mr. Lyford aimed his flashlight at it, the figure took off running into the darkness, leaving yet another baffled witness. In the 1970s and 80s, a series of confrontations began in Chittenden, where the mystery photo was taken. One of the most dramatic involved Everett Pike. In the spring of 1984, Mr. Pike was wakened by loud screaming in his dooryard. This longtime hunter wasn't usually easy to spook, but he told investigator Ted Pratt, "I just couldn't get out of bed. It was a horrible scream. It lasted 5 to 7 seconds. His terror escalated when he heard something rip his cellar door off its hinges. Whatever it was, noisily cased the basement, then fled, leaving a handprint, a footprint, and a broken door made of solid 2-inch oak. When I spoke with James Guyette of Heartland, he recounted his especially poignant encounter of April 1984. It was still clear in his mind. I suspect such episodes imprint themselves indelibly. He says he was driving north on Interstate 91 at about 6 o'clock in the morning. When he was within sight of the Heartland Dam, Mr. Guyette spotted a huge hairy animal man swinging its arms as it walked along the roadside about 100 yards away. He says it was tall and lanky, but unquestionably walking upright on 2 legs. The creature moved down the bank beside the interstate heading west, away from the Connecticut River. Later, when telling his wife of the reality-altering encounter, Mr. Guyette found himself weeping. It is easy to relegate all such sightings to the distant past, but that would be a mistake. Such events are still happening on a regular basis. We just don't know about it because local newspapers rarely report them. For example, Mr. Rowell delivered his Polaroids to the Middlebury newspaper, yet they were never published. Noah Hoffenberg of the Bennington Banner is a great exception. He covered a cluster of local Bigfoot sightings, without ever putting tongue-in-cheek. One such story is the September 2003 experience of Ray Dufresne of Winooski, Vermont. After dropping his daughter off at Southern Vermont College in Bennington, Ray headed north on Route 7, beginning the 125-mile drive back to his home. It was about 7 p.m. When he had reached the highest elevation between Bennington and Manchester, Mr. Dufresne noticed something moving in a narrow, deserted field on his right. "What the fuck was that?" he said in the empty car. During a recent interview at his home, he told me, "It was a big black hairy thing walking strangely. Long hairy arms, the body was huge. It was a lot bigger than me. I'm 220, so this must have been over 270. A lot over. Over 6 feet. Wider. Beefier. I just couldn't believe it. Must be a man in a gorilla suit, I thought." He lost sight of it as it moved east into the woods of Glastonbury Mountain, an area where, over the years, many strange sights and sounds have been reported. "I kept driving," Mr. Dufresne said. "There was nothing around. No cars, no houses. was a desolate place. Now I kick myself because I didn't go back and investigate. So what do you think you saw? I asked him. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot, he said. I was never a Bigfoot believer. But I saw what I saw, and I can't change what I saw. The truth of Mr. Dufresne's tale was buttressed when other people reported similar sightings in the same area. After Ray's story appeared in the Bennington Banner, San Francisco writer Doug Dorst came forth to report that he had seen a similar creature a week earlier, as he was driving toward Bennington College to give a reading. He saw what Ray did not. The creature's face, which he described as light brown. Two women, Sidel Wiltshire and Anne Ruicki, said they had also seen the beast the same night as Mr. Dufresne. They'd estimated they'd been as close as 10 feet away. While all concerned admit a misidentification or hoax might be possible, Ray Dufresne says it definitely wasn't a bear. As a lifelong hunter, he can easily identify a bear. Besides, bears will not walk on their hind legs for any great distance. A hoax is another matter, but the man in a gorilla suit solution is pretty far-fetched and dangerous. Armed men in pickups routinely patrol that isolated area, many of whom would be delighted to bag Vermont's first Bigfoot. Any trickster dressed in a gorilla suit would be about as safe as a jokester wearing antlers in the woods during deer season. I'll conclude with a more recent sighting investigated by Christopher Nowell, a writer and teacher at Vermont College. As an investigator for the National Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, Christopher has examined many Vermont Bigfoot experiences. In May 2006, he told me, 2 13-year-old cousins, a girl and a boy, were visiting their grandparents' cabin in Marshfield. While they were out on their ATVs traveling along a disused logging road, they were stopped by a fallen tree. As they were turning around, a figure they described as 7 feet tall and hairy rose, then dashed on into the forest. Christopher says, 7 feet always seems to be a fallback height when describing these things. When he interviewed family members, the cousin's uncle told of another dramatic encounter in the same general area around 1980. He recalled that when he was 19, he and a few friends were doing some night fishing at the reservoir. Someone or something in the bushes began throwing large rocks over their heads and into the water. It was as if someone was trying to scare them. This sort of thing has happened in many cases. It's not as if the rocks are aimed to hit anyone, only frighten them. It usually works. There are hundreds of additional examples. One is either convinced or one isn't. Having looked at some of the evidence, anecdotes, castings, hair, even scat, we still gravitate back to the pictures. Did Sandra Monsey photograph Champ? Did the Chittenden team snap the state's first Bigfoot photo? The latter is in no way a hoax. It has been kept out of the public eye for almost 30 years. No one had anything to gain by concealing what may be the best evidence Vermont can offer about Bigfoot's existence. We don't even know why it was hushed up. To protect the photographer from inevitable ridicule? To preserve the inn's reputation as a safe vacation getaway, as opposed to a reservation for unknown animals? Mystery, wrapped in mystery. In trying to make sense of all this, I sought out an expert, Lauren Coleman. an internationally known anthropologist and Bigfoot authority in Portland, Maine. Mr. Coleman is the author of Bigfoot, the true story of apes in America. I asked him the obvious questions. For example, I said, I think any animal living here in Vermont can occasionally be found beside the road, dead. Yet as far as I know, no Bigfoot body has ever been found there or anywhere else. What do you make of that? Why do we find roadkill? He said, because those animals are not very bright. Yes, deer, moose, raccoons, and a few bear get killed on the roads. But if there are some intelligent biped hairy hominids out there, they appear to be too smart to be killed by a run-in with a car. Would you care to predict the future? I asked. What do you think will be the final outcome? Will Bigfoot join mountain gorillas in the biology books? Or is it more likely to remain in the realm of folklore and cryptozoology? Mr. Coleman seemed to ponder the question. I sensed that a new great ape, probably discovered in Asia or Oceania, will surprise us all in the next 25 years, perhaps on the island of Sumatra. But as far as the classic American Bigfoot, I think it might be another 100 years until they are discovered. We have to be patient. It took 60 or 70 years to discover and capture the first giant panda and the mountain gorilla. Bigfoot will be an even bigger wonder. Verification for zoology and biology must come with a live capture and DNA or blood samples, or a dead body. It's that simple. No body, no proof they exist. Now I understand that, but of course I'm in the live capture camp as far as proving they exist. So the evidence gained thus far, whether anecdotal or physical, isn't enough. And the Bigfoot photo, whether real, hoax, or misperceived shadows, keeps the mystery alive.